You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. I came home early from work. The rain had been relentless, hammering down since noon, and I didn't feel like waiting for it to die down. I had the groceries in hand, mostly canned stuff, some meat for later in the week. As I entered through the garage, the smell of wet pavement and damp wood filled my lungs. My wife's voice drifted in from the kitchen, sharp and clear, like I wasn't even there. "I'm done, Mom," she said, sounding casual. "I can't live with this anymore. I'm divorcing him." I froze at the threshold. Her voice had the same tired amusement she'd used when I'd forgotten to fix the kitchen light or left the car windows open overnight. She wasn't talking about me, not in any way that made sense. She was just talking like it was no big deal. I can't tolerate him and his barely above minimum wage handyman salary. "It's embarrassing." She laughed, the sound too familiar, too easy. Her mom joined in, a low chuckle on the other end. No guilt, no hesitation, no sign of conflict, just amusement, a sense of superiority. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. The bags in my hands felt heavy, but not in a way that bothered me. It just was. I didn't need to say anything. She hadn't even noticed I was home yet, and part of me thought I'd rather keep it that way. After a few moments, I turned, walked quietly back into the garage, and dropped the bags on the counter. Then, without thinking, I sat down in an old lawn chair that had been there for years, maybe decades. It creaked under my weight, the same chair I used to sit in after mowing the lawn, or when I had to think about something without talking about it. I watched the rain hit the pavement, each drop rippling into another, then another. It didn't matter. None of it did. I wasn't angry, not sad, just clear. I wasn't going to fight her. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg for something that wasn't real. I leaned back, letting the wet air press against my skin, and I let it all go. The rain didn't stop, not even after dinner. I cooked like I always did, slapping some meat on the grill while she sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. I didn't need to ask what she was doing. It didn't matter. She wasn't looking at me, so I didn't look at her. I plated the food, set it down on the table, and sat down across from her. She barely glanced up. "You know," she said, tapping her phone with her fingers, "maybe we should separate like adults." No drama. No court stuff. I raised an eyebrow, but I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at her, watching how effortlessly she said it, like it was a done deal. She looked at me, then, still smug. "What do you think?" I nodded. "That sounds fine." She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "What?" "I'll leave," I said, setting my fork down. "You can have the house. The car too. You can keep everything. I don't need it." She leaned back in her chair, almost chuckling. "Wow. You're really just letting me take it all, huh? No fight, no nothing?" I didn't respond. I had no reason to. She didn't need a fight. She never did. She shook her head, laughing, the sound cutting through the quiet. "I guess I'm the lucky one here, huh?" She tapped her phone again, eyes back on the screen. "Guess you're gonna have to move into your brother's guest room after this." I shrugged. "Yeah, probably." She didn't say anything else after that. We ate in silence, finishing the meal without another word. She wasn't upset. She wasn't surprised. Just smug. I could hear the faint click of her typing as she sent messages under the table. That night, I went to bed early, already knowing she'd be up late on her phone. She'd send a text to her friends, probably laugh about how easy it was to walk away from me. Maybe she'd call her mother, tell her how cooperative I was, how broke I was. That was the part she liked best, I think, me being cooperative in my own failure. The next morning I made coffee. She was already up, her phone glued to her hand, her face unreadable. "So," she said with a half smile, "I'll make the lawyer's appointment this afternoon. We'll get the papers started and we can be done with this." She tapped her screen again, then looked at me. "I don't need much, just make it quick." I nodded. "Sure," she laughed under her breath. "It's almost like you're relieved." I didn't argue. There was no point. By the time I sat down at my desk that morning, I had an email from Jeff, the lawyer. I opened it, skimming the message. He wanted to make sure everything was in order for the divorce filing. His tone was efficient, too polite. I replied to him just as quickly, confirming I was ready to move forward. I told him I'd give up the house, the car, everything. No demands. No back and forth. No mess. He responded almost immediately. I'd already sent back the signed agreements by the time she was leaving for brunch. the finality of it already sinking in. No arguments, no long meetings, no complications. I hadn't expected any. She had no idea what she'd left behind. She went out with her friends to brunch, probably to gloat about how easy it all was. I didn't care. She'd had her fun. I was done. A few days later, Jeff's office started sending over the paperwork. She never once questioned why the legal name on the filings didn't match the mortgage. She didn't ask why I was the one to make the final call. To her, I was just the guy she married and discarded. 2 years ago, right after my grandfather's funeral, I made the change. It was a quiet decision, nothing dramatic. Just a shift, really. I'd been thinking about it for a while. The name I'd grown up with, it had never meant anything to me. It was just something handed down, like a family heirloom that never felt right. I had no real connection to it. But my mother's maiden name? That was different. I didn't tell anyone, not even her. I didn't want her to think it was some kind of sentimental gesture. It wasn't. It was just the practical thing to do. It was my way out of everything I didn't need anymore. A fresh start, but not in the way people typically mean. No need for fanfare. I just walked into the courthouse, filed the paperwork, and took her name. Nobody noticed, and nobody had to. During the marriage, I'd kept the whole thing under wraps. I let her believe I was broke. Let her assume that when the divorce came, I'd be left with nothing but some second-hand furniture and a part-time job. I let her think I was living in my brother's guest room, patching up drywall, trying to scrape by. She never once asked why I wasn't pursuing bigger projects. She never cared to wonder why we didn't have more, and why would she? She was too busy with her own life, her own ambitions, too busy judging me by the surface. As long as I was just enough to keep her around, it worked. The truth was, I was never broke. I'd been quietly building a different kind of future. Every dollar I earned during the marriage went into separate accounts she'd never seen. I didn't even use my real name at the bank. My trust was set up long before we met. She never asked why I never mentioned it. She never asked about the name change either. I'd expected her to at least notice at some point. But no, she never did. I was always just me, the same guy who worked odd hours and couldn't keep the kitchen lights working. And the trust? She didn't know. Hell, she didn't even know it existed. When she started talking about divorce, it didn't hit me until she said it so easily that night. I'm done. I can't tolerate this anymore. That I knew. I knew it had to be done. That the timing was finally right. The name change had been in place for over 2 years now, just like the legal requirements for the trust to activate. It had been a waiting game, but I'd been patient. I knew how this would play out. She thought she was winning, thought she was walking away with everything. She didn't know what she was walking away from. I didn't tell her, not when she was so sure, so confident about how she was taking it all. I didn't need to. I was already preparing for the next phase, already planning for the trust to activate the moment the divorce was finalized. When I handed her the house, the car, and all the small tokens she seemed to want, I knew it wouldn't matter. Because in the end, I would be free, and in the end, she wouldn't be. The day after the divorce papers were signed, I made my way downtown to the financial firm. It wasn't a flashy building, but it exuded a quiet power that only certain places can manage. The lobby was all dark marble and polished glass, with low, understated lighting that seemed to absorb sound. No one would ever guess the kind of money that passed through there, until you walked in the door, felt the weight of everything. It wasn't about show, it was about control, preservation. I was led to a private office on the top floor, away from the prying eyes of anyone who might wonder who was behind the door. The room was plush, furniture that had cost more than my first car, bookshelves stocked with history, art, things that told a story without needing words. A thick leather chair was waiting for me. I sat down, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. This wasn't about splurging or flaunting. This was about legacy, about the kind of wealth you don't talk about at brunch. The executor, a quiet man with a face that seemed carved out of stone, stood by the desk, waiting. He glanced at me, checking his notes, before speaking in that calm, no-nonsense tone that matched the room. "Mr. New Name," he said, emphasizing my new surname, as though it was just another routine thing in his day. And in a way, it was. "I trust everything has been in order since the divorce?" I nodded. "All finalized." He nodded back, sliding a few pieces of paper toward me across the polished surface of the desk. "As we discussed, your family trust was built under specific conditions. Divorce finalized. Your legal name has been restored for more than 2 years now, We are now able to activate the trust he didn't need to explain the specifics. I already knew them. I had read the papers, signed the documents. I'd been waiting for this day, and now that it was here, it didn't feel like much. The moment was too quiet for something this big. He looked up again, meeting my eyes, a slight glimmer of approval in his. Your quarterly disbursements will begin soon. $12.8 million, divided as per your instructions. The money will be available in full, under your sole control. I felt no rush, no sudden adrenaline. Just a calm clarity, a feeling of rightness. Quarterly? Yes, every 3 months his eyes scanned the papers before him, confirming the next set of details. This trust was never about flash. It's about preservation. This was built to maintain the legacy, not to spend it recklessly. You understand that? I nodded again, my hands resting in my lap, calm but focused. I understand. The executor smiled slightly. I trust you do. The foundation was built on quiet stability, not on public display. That's why it's never been discussed. You've been more than careful, Mr. New Name. That's why everything is in place for you now. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. It had taken years to set this all up. Years of quiet work, of decisions no one noticed. I thought about how, in all the time we were together, she never once asked me about the name Change. Not once. And that was the mistake. She thought I was small, too small to matter. She never questioned why I didn't seem to care about the things she cared about. Money, status, security. She was too busy assuming I was just like everyone else, someone to walk all over. She assumed my lack of ambition meant I was less than she was. She never saw the bigger picture, never realized I was playing a different game, and that's what cost her everything. The executor slid another paper toward me, confirming the terms and the next steps. You'll be able to direct the funds as needed. The trust holds significant assets, but we'll ensure it remains protected, as intended. No changes, no diversions, I signed, the pen moving smoothly across the page. Each stroke felt like a final confirmation of everything I'd worked for. Everything will be in place, the executor said as I finished, leaning back in his chair. You'll be able to access the funds as you need them. But as you know, Mr. New Name, the family's wealth is built on keeping things quiet. You'll need to maintain that discretion. And, of course, the legacy remains your responsibility. I understand, I said again, this time more firmly. The executor nodded, standing up. Very well. Everything is in motion. You'll receive your first disbursement in 2 weeks. As I left the office, stepping back into the cool air of the city, the reality of it all settled in. The money was secondary. It was the freedom that came with it, the power to finally step out from beneath everything, the power to move, to be me, without the weight of anyone's expectations or assumptions. I'd never been the man she thought I was. And now, I didn't have to be. A few days after the paperwork was finalized, she texted me. Let's have dinner. For closure, maybe. I didn't need to ask what she really meant. This wasn't about closure. It was about her final chance to gloat. To prove she'd gotten what she wanted, without any messy entanglements. To say she'd moved on. So, I agreed. When I walked into the bistro, I could already tell. The place screamed trendy. Sleek lines, dim lighting, every table dressed in white linens. The kind of place where people came to show off. And there she was, sitting at a table by the window, looking like she belonged there. A form-fitting dress, heels that could have cost a month's rent, makeup done just so. She was a vision of success, of a life moving forward without a second thought about anything, or anyone. I had come straight from the woodshop, still wearing my work clothes, the ones I always wore when I was knee-deep in whatever project was occupying my mind that week. My hands still had sawdust on them. My jeans were faded, worn at the knees. My boots, scuffed, practical. I didn't bother with any pretense. I wasn't here to impress anyone. She looked me over as I sat down across from her, her lips curling slightly, but it wasn't a smile. It was more of a smirk, like she couldn't decide whether to pity me or be amused by me. You look different, she said, her voice soft, almost too sweet. I thought you'd at least try to clean up for this. I didn't think it mattered, I replied, keeping my tone flat. She let out a laugh, short and mocking. Well, it doesn't, I guess. You've always been like that, too focused on work to care about the rest of it. I didn't say anything. She was digging. Let her. She took a sip of her wine, eyes scanning the room as if looking for some invisible validation. I'm sure you're not used to places like this. Probably feels a little out of place, huh? I'm fine, I said, still not looking at her. My eyes stayed on the menu. Not that I cared what I ordered. I'd barely touched food in the last few days. What's it like, moving on so quickly? Her face flickered for a moment, but she hit it fast, like she was too used to being in control of the situation. Oh, it's not hard, she said, glancing at her phone before setting it down, her fingers tapping idly on the table. I've got everything figured out now. No more worrying about certain things. Just about making sure I don't waste any more time on people who can't keep up. I nodded. Sounds good. She didn't seem to notice how I was giving her nothing. She was too wrapped up in herself, in the new life she thought she was building. She went on about her plans, about her new job, the things she was buying, how much easier it was to live the way she wanted without anyone holding her back. I let her talk, let her think she was winning. When the bill came, I waited until the waiter had walked away before I reached into my wallet. She was looking at me with that same smug expression, like I wasn't even worth a real effort. I pulled out a $500 bill and slid it across the table. Her eyes dropped to the cash, then flicked up to me, confusion creeping in. What's this for? I didn't say anything, just sat back in my chair, watching her. She blinked a few times, her fingers touching the edge of the bill as if she wasn't sure how to process it. You're tipping the waiter this much? Her voice faltered, just barely. You can't be serious. I didn't answer. I just waited. Her gaze flickered, and for the first time, I saw the faintest crack in her confidence. She had no idea why I'd done it. She still thought I was broke. That $500 wasn't the kind of thing someone like me was supposed to do. She looked at the bill again, then at me, her smile faltering for a moment. I guess it's nice to see you. Generous, at least. I just shrugged. It's a good tip. She laughed, but it was tight, forced. She picked up the bill, folded it, and slid it into her purse. Well, it's certainly a lot more than I expected from you, she muttered, more to herself than to me. She didn't get it. She still didn't see it. The tension in the air thickened, and I let it sit there. She kept looking at me, trying to piece things together, but it was too late. I was already done. The next morning, she was at brunch with a few friends, sitting at a table by the window, sipping mimosas and talking like she was the queen of the world. I didn't think much about it until my phone buzzed. It was an email from Jeff, her lawyer. His subject line was short, Trust Activation Notification. I opened it, scanning the 4 short sentences. It didn't need much explanation. Trust activated, assets personal, no claims. I'd been waiting for this. But for her, it was still just a background noise in her life. She wasn't expecting it yet. I texted Jeff. Call her, it's time. Not even 5 minutes later, her phone rang. I could hear her voice through the walls of my apartment, a faint laugh in the background, but when she picked it up, I knew things were about to change. Hello? She answered, casual, like nothing could touch her. Her name, Jeff said on the other end, his tone clipped, businesslike. You need to look at something. Now. She paused, rolling her eyes. What is it, Jeff? I'm kind of in the middle of something here. Jeff's voice turned a little firmer, more insistent. It's the trust. The letter came through. You need to read it. There was a pause. Her tone dropped just a little, but not much. I don't have time for this. What's the big deal? I'm not going to explain it over the phone, he said. Read the letter, and then we'll talk. It's important. There was another pause, this time longer. I could tell she was starting to feel something shift, but she still didn't get it. Fine, she muttered. I'll read it later. Her name, Jeff pressed, his voice finally cutting through her act. You need to look at it. Right now I could almost hear her roll her eyes, but she must have realized something was off because I heard the sound of paper rustling. There was silence for a few seconds before she spoke again. Her voice wasn't as light anymore. What the hell is this, Jeff? I could hear his reply, low but clear. The trust was activated. It's now fully in force. All assets tied to it are personal, not marital, and there are no claims. She went quiet for a long moment, longer than I expected. She wasn't processing it yet, but the confusion was written all over her voice when she finally responded. Wait, what? What do you mean? That doesn't make any sense, she laughed, trying to cover up the crack in her confidence. I thought the trust was just a family thing. It wasn't worth anything, right? Jeff didn't soften. The assets were never shared, her name. They were protected by your ex-husband's pre-marriage name and remained so throughout your marriage. The trust was activated post-separation. By walking away when you did, you gave up access to millions. I heard her inhale sharply. I could picture her face, eyes wide, disbelief flickering, as the weight of it all came crashing down on her. There was no way she understood it yet. I don't understand. Are you telling me that he had this the entire time? And I never... Yes, Jeff said, cutting her off. The name change, the assets, the trust, everything. It was all there, it set up before you even knew him. I could feel her panic start to creep into the phone call, the tightness in her voice as she struggled to keep it together. But we were married. Everything should be split. You said it would be. Jeff's voice didn't waver. There was nothing to split. He had full legal control of his assets. You never asked the right questions. Right questions? She stumbled, but the realization hit her with full force. Oh my God, she whispered the words. I gave up millions. The words didn't sink in for a while. She sat there for a long moment, the silence hanging in the air. I could feel it, even from across town. The weight of everything she thought she understood about me, about us, slipping through her fingers like sand. Her friends were still talking, but I could hear them quiet down as she slowly processed it. I imagined her face going pale, her eyes darting to the others at the table, the embarrassment starting to creep in. She couldn't hide it anymore. Not this time. There was a long, awkward silence on the phone. Finally, she spoke again, the words coming out in a broken, tight tone. I don't know what to do. Jeff didn't give her any sympathy. There's nothing to be done. It's over, her name. I could practically hear the air leave her lungs. When she finally spoke, it wasn't to Jeff anymore. It was to herself. I don't understand how I missed this. She sounded like she might break down right there. Because you never asked, Jeff said, his voice impassive. You should have asked. The silence stretched on, and I could tell she wasn't even hearing him anymore. All she could hear was the weight of that realization. The loss. Her friends sitting there across from her, probably confused, maybe even worried about what she was going through. But they didn't know. None of them knew what she'd just lost. And that was the point. It wasn't my job to tell her. I had let her figure it out on her own. I was working in my shop when the knock came. It wasn't a polite knock, more like a hammer on wood, loud, insistent. I wiped my hands on the rag I kept on the counter and walked over to the door, bracing myself. I already knew who it was. No one else would show up uninvited. When I opened it, she stood there in that damn designer dress, still looking polished, still trying to hold on to the image of control. But her face was pale, her eyes frantic, like she'd been running on pure adrenaline all morning. The edges of her makeup were smudged, and I could tell she hadn't slept. I need answers, she snapped, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. Now. She walked into the small apartment like she owned the place, heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She barely gave it a second glance, her eyes focused on me, on whatever she thought she was about to find. I closed the door quietly behind her. You already know what's going on. Don't play dumb, she said, turning to face me, her voice sharp. I know about the trust. I know about everything. Is it true? I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. I could see it in her face, the panic, the disbelief, the hurt. She thought I'd been small. She thought I was nothing. And now she was realizing she was the one who had been blind the whole time. I stepped aside, motioning to the couch. Sit down. She ignored me, still standing, fists clenched at her sides. Is it true? She demanded again, this time quieter but heavier, like she couldn't breathe without hearing the answer. I nodded slowly, calm. It's true. Her eyes searched my face like I was hiding something. All this time, you let me think, you let me believe you were just some broke handyman? That's what you wanted to believe. The words hit her like a slap. She flinched, her eyes flickering with a mix of anger and hurt. How could you let me think that? Her voice cracked. I thought I knew you, but I didn't. I didn't know you at all. I felt nothing in that moment. No pride, no satisfaction, just emptiness. I had made my peace with this a long time ago. I was done trying to explain myself. I turned away and walked over to the small counter by the window, where I had placed the envelope, the finalized divorce papers, sealed and ready to go. I picked it up and handed it to her without looking back. Her hand trembled as she took it, but she didn't open it right away. Instead, she looked at me like she was waiting for something. Something more. "Can't we just—" Her voice broke. "Can't we just fix this?" I shook my head slowly. "No, nothing can be fixed." She stood there, staring at the envelope in her hands, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. She seemed smaller somehow, like she was realizing the enormity of what had happened and what she had lost. I wasn't about to soften the blow. She had made her choices. She had walked away without ever really seeing me, without ever asking the right questions. She tried again, her voice pleading now. "Please just give me a chance to talk. We can work through this. We can fix it. I didn't understand what you had." I cut her off, my voice calm but firm. "You don't get to come in here now and try to change everything. It's too late for that." Her eyes welled up, but I didn't flinch. She wasn't the first person to break down in front of me, and she wouldn't be the last. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I was already walking toward the door. I didn't need to hear any more of it. I wasn't interested in her guilt or her apologies. "Leave," I said quietly, not looking back. She hesitated. She opened her mouth again, but no words came. She finally just nodded, her shoulders slumping as she turned toward the door. Without another word, she walked out of the apartment, leaving the door open behind her. I closed it softly and locked it, and then I sat down, staring at the silence. It didn't take long for the article to hit. I'd been at the workshop most of the morning, tuning a few old cabinets when my phone buzzed. At first I didn't think much of it, just another notification. But then the headline caught my eye. "Local business mogul pledges $1 million to historic charity. Ties revealed to historic family. Trust." The photo showed me at a gala, standing with a group of people I barely recognized, my face framed by a half smile, holding a glass of wine. I hadn't even realized someone had snapped it when I made the pledge. The headline was clear, my full name. The one that had once been just a name to me, now plastered on public pages. And then the connection to the trust. I hadn't planned on making it public, not like this. But I had known the moment the trust activated that the details would eventually come out. This was just the start. But for her, it was something else entirely. By the time I'd finished reading, I already knew she would be going through hell. She didn't have to see the article for herself. I could already hear her friends bombarding her with texts. The notifications flooded in, screenshots, questions, disbelief. She wouldn't know where to look first. I imagined her, sitting there in her kitchen or wherever she was, phone in hand, everything hitting her all at once. She wasn't ready for any of it. She'd thought she'd walked away with what she wanted, but she hadn't known about this. She never even suspected it. The phone rang in my pocket and I didn't answer. I already knew who it was. It was probably her. Or maybe one of her friends. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the text came. "What the hell is this?" I didn't respond. It didn't matter anymore. Back in her kitchen, I could see it unfolding. The shock on her face as she read the article, her hands trembling, unable to process what she was seeing. The image of me, her ex-husband, suddenly at the center of something bigger than anything she had imagined. She'd thought she'd gotten the last laugh, walking away with the house and the car. But she didn't even know who she was walking away from. Another buzz, another text. "How could you keep this from me?" I leaned against the counter, staring at the phone, but I didn't pick it up. It wasn't my problem anymore. The phone rang again. She was relentless. I turned the volume down, the noise fading into the background. I didn't need to hear it. I thought about her sitting there, in her kitchen, staring at her phone. The house that had felt like a trophy was just a place now, empty. She had nothing left, not really. The money I'd set aside for myself was never meant to be flashy, never meant to impress anyone. But for her, it was everything she thought I'd never have. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the car. It was the world she thought was just out of reach, something she'd lost the moment she walked away. And then the call came. Her mother. Her voice was tight, angry, like she was barely holding it together. "I can't believe this. Why didn't you tell me? How did I not know? Your ex-husband has what?" The realization hit her too. The shock, the disbelief, the guilt. "I didn't know either, Mom," came the reply, small and defeated. I didn't know. There was a pause. And then, her mother, still furious, "You should have asked. You should have known. This isn't just about him. This is about you, too." Her mother was right. but it didn't matter anymore. I imagined her sitting at the kitchen table now, face in her hands, staring at the phone she'd dropped on the counter. It was all crashing down, the quiet shockwave of realization rolling through her. Every text and email, a reminder that she didn't know the man she'd been married to at all. She unplugs the Wi-Fi. I could almost hear the snap of the cord as she did it, trying to cut herself off from everything, because deep down, she knew there was nothing left to say. She'd never asked the right questions. She hadn't even bothered to look. Now, the world knew, and she didn't. The door to Jeff's office slammed open. I was sitting in my car outside the building, getting ready to leave for the day when I saw her. She stormed past the receptionist, her heels clicking loud enough to rattle the walls. She didn't care who saw her. She wasn't going to be ignored anymore. Jeff didn't flinch when she burst in. He didn't even look up at first, just kept his eyes on the papers in front of him, fingers tapping against the desk like he had all the time in the world. "I want to challenge the settlement," she said, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "I'm not letting him get away with this." Jeff finally looked up, raising an eyebrow, his expression as cool as ever. "You've already signed it, her name. The settlement's final." "I don't care," her voice cracked on the last word, and she took a step forward, bracing herself on the edge of his desk. "It's not fair. You're telling me there's no way to fix this?" Jeff leaned back in his chair, his hands folding neatly in front of him. "It's not about fairness. It's about the law, and everything was done by the book. Everything is documented. The assets were never shared during the marriage. You didn't have access to them. The trust was insulated." Her face twisted, disbelief still clouding her features. "But he had it. He hid it from me. This entire time, he was lying about everything." "That's fraud!" Jeff shook his head, his tone cutting through her anger like a knife. "No, it's not fraud. Your ignorance wasn't fraud. It was arrogance. You didn't ask the right questions, and now you're paying the price for it." Her breath hitched, her hands clutching the armrests of the chair like she was about to snap. "You're telling me there's nothing? No loopholes? No way to fix this?" "There are no loopholes," Jeff said flatly. "This trust was structured to ensure exactly what happened. There's nothing to challenge. It was never part of the marriage. He didn't owe you anything." She opened her mouth to say something, but it faltered. She couldn't argue with the truth. The words didn't come out. Instead, she just stood there, staring at him, the reality sinking in. The humiliation was thick in the air, hanging between the two of them like a weight. Jeff gave her one last look, his expression unreadable, before he stood up from his chair and grabbed a folder from the corner of the desk. "You should have asked her name." His voice was firm, but there was no sympathy there, just the cold, sharp edge of inevitability. She didn't say anything. She didn't even move. I could tell she was still trying to find a way out of it, still hoping there was something Jeff wasn't telling her, some escape hatch she could wriggle through. But she wasn't going to find it. Not here, not now. "Nothing can be fixed," Jeff added, his tone no longer cold, just matter of fact. "You didn't ask, and now you have to live with the consequences." For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't blink. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the office, shoulders stiff, steps heavy. I waited a few minutes before following her out of the building, knowing there was nothing left to say. No more apologies, no more excuses. She was going to have to live with the silence of her own choices, the same silence I'd lived with for so long. A few days later, a letter arrived for me. It wasn't an email, not a text, a real handwritten letter. I opened it without any expectation, but when I saw the single line written in the familiar scrawl, it hit me with a strange sort of finality. "I thought you were small." Turns out I was. I set the letter down on the workbench in my shop. The words didn't stir anything in me. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a quiet recognition that it was over. The story had been written. It was done. I didn't have to respond. I didn't need to call her or tell her how she'd missed it, how she'd spent years walking away from the truth. She hadn't sent the letter to me. She'd sent it to herself, a feeble attempt to ease the bruises she'd created. I picked up the letter, folded it, and placed it in the drawer marked Settled Accounts, the drawer where things that were over, that needed no more thought or weight, went to rest. Then I stood there for a moment, looking at the work I had been doing, the grain of the wood, the smooth surfaces I'd spent years perfecting. This was where I had built everything, not just the money, the strength, the quiet resolve. The door to the shop opened, the light outside sharp and sudden. I walked toward the city that evening, where the gala was being held, a charity event I'd committed to months ago. It felt like the right time to step into the world I'd kept hidden, the one that had been waiting for me all along. The ballroom was packed with people, flashing cameras, hands raised in conversation, the hum of easy wealth and polished smiles. I took the stage and stood in front of the crowd, microphone in hand, the warmth of the spotlight familiar but strange. I spoke about legacy, about discernment, the importance of knowing what truly matters, of building something that lasts, something that doesn't seek approval but is rooted in quiet integrity. As I finished my speech, the applause ringing in my ears, I thought about her, how she was somewhere across town, probably watching the event on TV alone, drinking cheap wine from a bottle she'd picked up at a corner store. In that moment, I realized the story had kept going, and it had gotten better without her. She hadn't asked the right questions, but she hadn't needed to know the answers. I had my own story now, one that wasn't bound by anything she ever understood, and I was fine with that.